Welcome to our deep dive into emotional intelligence. We're going to be exploring Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, today. And I'm really excited about this one because I think, it challenges a lot of our assumptions about what it takes to actually, succeed in life.
Yeah, I think for a long time we've put so much emphasis on IQ, are you smart? Can you, solve problems and all those things?
Right, like, are you book smart?
Exactly. But Goleman is saying that there's this whole other kind of intelligence, and it's just as important, if not more important.
Okay, so what makes emotional intelligence, this EI, so different?
Well, think about it this way. You could have, a super high IQ, be like a genius, right?
Yeah.
But if you can't manage your emotions, if you don't understand other people's feelings, you're going to struggle.
Right, so you could be the smartest person in the room, but if you can't, work with a team or handle stress.
Yeah, or even motivate yourself to get things done.
Then what good is that, right?
Exactly. And Goleman actually, he uses this really powerful example in the book about this family, the Chauncey family. They were on this train that was sinking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they had this daughter who had cerebral palsy, and they knew they had to get her to safety. So, they didn't even hesitate. They pushed her through this window.
Oh, my God.
The safety, and they ended up,
sacrificing themselves.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's using that example to say it wasn't their IQ that saved their daughter. It was this
overwhelming love.
Yes, this deep empathy and compassion.
Right. So it makes you think, do we actually have two minds going on, the rational mind and then the emotional mind?
Well, that's exactly what Goleman argues. He says we do.
Yeah.
And he has this other story about this woman who's going through a divorce.
Okay.
And on the surface, she's saying, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine. But she's got these tears streaming down her face.
Oh, so it's she's saying one thing.
But her body's telling a totally different story.
Yeah.
And so it's her rational mind is trying to keep it together, but then her emotional mind is leaking through.
So how do these two minds work together? It seems like sometimes they're fighting each other.
Right. Well, there's this constant interplay between our thoughts and our feelings, and Goleman goes into the neuroscience of it all.
Okay, so he gets into the brain stuff.
Yeah, so there's this part of our brain called the amygdala.
Okay.
And it's basically the alarm system of our brain. It's responsible for those gut reactions we have, our emotional responses.
It's when you're driving and someone cuts you off and you just feel that rage.
Exactly. That's the amygdala firing off.
Okay.
But then we have this other part of our brain. It's called the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
And this is the thinking part of our brain. It helps us make more considered decisions.
Okay, so it kind of calms down the amygdala.
Yeah, think of it like the damper switch on the amygdala. It allows us to pause before we just react impulsively.
So next time I'm about to yell at the person who cut me off, I should just take a breath and let my prefrontal cortex catch up.
Exactly. It gives you that moment to choose a better response.
I like that.
But Goleman, he doesn't stop there. He breaks emotional intelligence down into 5 practical domains.
Okay, so it's not just all this heady brain science.
No, it's actually really applicable to our everyday lives.
So what are these 5 domains?
All right, so we have self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills.
Wow, so a lot to unpack there. Could you give me an example of what mastering one of those domains would look like in real life?
Sure, let's take empathy.
Yeah.
Someone who has strong empathy, they can pick up on these subtle cues like body language or someone's tone of voice, and they can understand how someone else is feeling, even if that person isn't saying it directly.
So it's a sixth sense almost.
Yeah, it's being able to really tune into someone else's emotional state.
And that's got to be helpful in, every part of life, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's crucial for your relationships, for your career, for everything.
Yeah.
Imagine a manager who can accurately assess how their team is feeling and then adjust their leadership style based on that.
Versus a manager who's totally clueless.
Right. Who's just why isn't everyone performing at their best?
Totally. So it's emotional intelligence is this secret weapon for navigating the world.
Yeah.
But where does it come from? Are we born with it, or can you learn it?
That's a great question. And Goleman, he really gets into the nature versus nurture debate in the book. He looks at how our early experiences, especially with our families, can shape our emotional intelligence.
Okay.
He even talks about this kind of chilling case study of Ted Bundy.
The serial killer.
Yeah, and how his really messed up childhood might have contributed to his psychopathy.
That's intense. But does that mean if you had a rough childhood, you're doomed?
No, not at all. Goleman is really clear that while our family plays a big role, we're not prisoners of our past.
Okay, that's good to know.
we can learn and grow emotionally throughout our lives.
So there's hope for us.
Yes, definitely.
But like, how do we actually do it? How do we improve our emotional intelligence?
Well, Goleman, he's got a lot of different approaches. Therapy can be really helpful. It can give you tools for managing tough emotions, but also just like conscious effort, consistent practice.
Okay, so it's like working out a muscle. You've got to keep at it.
Exactly. For example, he talks about this 10-second rule to manage anger. So like when you feel that rage building up, just pause, count to 10 before you do or say anything.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It gives your brain a chance to like catch up.
Right. It creates a little space between the feeling and the reaction.
I feel like I need to write this down, the 10-second rule.
Write it down. And it's not just about calming down. It's also about learning new strategies for like how to regulate your emotions.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, Goleman, he also seems really passionate about this idea of teaching emotional intelligence in schools. He mentions this program, the self-science program at the Nueva Learning Center.
Oh, yeah. It's a really fascinating example of how you can actually integrate emotional literacy into education.
So, like, what does that look like?
Well, imagine a classroom where kids are actually encouraged to talk about their feelings,
Instead of just being told to sit down and be quiet.
Exactly. And they're learning how to, handle anger constructively, resolve conflicts peacefully.
It sounds kind of revolutionary. But do you think it could work on a larger scale? Like, what if every school taught emotional intelligence?
It's an interesting thought, right? I mean, imagine a generation that's equipped to actually navigate their emotional world, understand other people.
Build healthy relationships.
Yeah, the impact on society could be huge.
That's a really powerful idea. I'm starting to see why Goleman's work is considered so, groundbreaking. It's not just about understanding our emotions. It's about using that understanding to create a better world, I guess.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point that Goleman makes. He argues that emotional intelligence isn't just good for individuals, it's actually essential for creating a healthier, more thriving society as a whole. Like if we had leaders who were more in tune with the feelings of the people they represent, workplaces where people were encouraged to work together and empathize with each other, wouldn't that be a good thing?
I see what you mean. But what about people who think that emotions just get in the way? Like, shouldn't we try to be more logical and, reasonable instead?
I think there's this misunderstanding that Goleman's saying we should just let our emotions run wild.
Yeah, I get that.
It's not about that at all. It's about understanding our emotions and learning how to manage them effectively.
Yeah.
It's not about being overly emotional. It's about being smart about your emotions.
So like finding that balance between, thinking and feeling.
Exactly. Goleman even talks about like a surgeon who's a brilliant technician, but has zero empathy for his patients.
Yeah, like a terrible bedside manner.
Right. He might be amazing in the operating room, but because he can't connect with people on an emotional level, he's not as good of a doctor.
Right. So it's not just about fixing the problem. It's about caring for the whole person.
Exactly. And that applies to any field, really. Imagine trying to lead a team or negotiate a deal, without any understanding of how people are feeling.
Right. You'd be missing a big part of the picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'm convinced emotional intelligence is important. But how do we actually develop these skills? It's not like they teach it in school, right?
Well, some schools are starting to incorporate emotional literacy programs, which is great.
Okay.
But Goleman really emphasizes that it's a lifelong journey.
So where do we even begin?
It starts with self-awareness. That means paying attention to your own emotions, understanding what triggers them, and recognizing how they affect, your thoughts and actions.
So like checking in with yourself throughout the day.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. It's like asking yourself, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And how is it affecting me?
Okay, but what if I'm like overwhelmed with, negative emotions? Is there anything you can do to like manage those?
Of course, that's where self-regulation comes in.
Okay.
It's about learning to manage those emotions instead of letting them control you.
Okay.
Goleman talks about things like that 10-second rule you mentioned earlier.
Right.
But also just like reframing your thoughts.
Yeah.
Like trying to see a difficult situation as a learning opportunity.
Oh, like life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it.
Exactly. And emotional intelligence gives you the tools to react in a more, positive way.
Right.
Goleman also talks about like the importance of seeking professional help if you're really struggling.
So it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. It's not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It's a sign of self-awareness.
Okay, cool. What about mindfulness? I've heard that like meditation and stuff can help with managing emotions?
Yeah, definitely. Goleman talks about how mindfulness practices, things like meditation, can really help you become more aware of your emotions in the present moment without judging them.
Funny.
Like training your mind to just observe your feelings without getting swept away by them.
So instead of just reacting, you can pause.
Exactly. You create that space.
Okay.
And it's not just about calming the mind.
Okay.
Goleman even connects emotional intelligence to physical health.
Really?
Yeah, there are studies that show, like, people who can manage their anger effectively have a lower risk of heart disease.
Oh, wow.
And people who are more optimistic and resilient tend to recover from illness faster.
So it's like taking care of your mental health can actually improve your physical health.
Exactly, and that's just the beginning. Goleman believes that emotional intelligence has these huge implications for society as a whole.
So it's not just about, like, personal success. It's about creating a better world for everyone.
Absolutely. Imagine a world where our leaders are more empathetic, where conflict is resolved peacefully, where people are just more tolerant and understanding of differences.
It sounds amazing. But how do we actually get there?
It starts with each of us. We can all try to develop these skills in ourselves and in the people around us. It's about recognizing that emotional intelligence is not a luxury. It's something we all need.
Okay, so we've talked about how important emotional intelligence is, like for us personally and, for society as a whole. But I'm thinking about like even bigger problems, like climate change or social injustice or, the fact that everyone seems to be fighting all the time these days. Could emotional intelligence like help with any of that?
That's a really interesting question. And I don't know if Goleman specifically addresses those issues in this book, but I think it's definitely something to think about, right? Like if we were all better at connecting with each other, at understanding where other people are coming from, maybe we could actually, work together to solve these huge problems.
Yeah, like if you can actually feel empathy for people on the other side of the world or, future generations who haven't even been born yet.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd be more likely to do something about climate change.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, emotional intelligence isn't just about empathy. It's about self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation. Like, what if businesses actually started prioritizing, social impact and environmental impact alongside profits? What if our leaders made decisions based on, empathy and understanding?
Like we need an emotional intelligence revolution or something.
I love that.
But like, how do we actually get there? Seems like a pretty big task.
Yeah, it might seem that way, but I think it starts with each individual, right? Like every time you choose to pause before reacting in anger, every time you try to see things from someone else's perspective, every time you choose compassion over judgment, you're actually contributing to that shift.
So like all those little things add up.
Yeah, think of it like a ripple effect.
Okay.
The more people embrace emotional intelligence, the further those ripples spread, It affects your family, your workplace, your community, and eventually maybe even the whole world.
Wow. Okay, no pressure, but the fate of humanity rests on our emotional intelligence.
Well, no pressure.
But seriously, as we wrap up this deep dive, like what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
I think Goleman says it best when he talks about how emotional intelligence isn't just a set of skills. It's actually a path to becoming, a better human being. It's about recognizing that we're all connected, understanding that our actions have an impact, and choosing to care about each other.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So to all our listeners out there, we challenge you to think about how you can cultivate emotional intelligence in your own life.
Yeah.
And inspire other people to do the same.
Definitely.
Whether it's practicing mindfulness, having more open and honest conversations, or just trying to be more understanding and compassionate, every little bit helps.
Remember, emotional intelligence is not a destination, it's a journey. There will be times when we mess up, when we let our emotions get the best of us. But the important thing is to learn from those experiences, to keep practicing, and to never give up on becoming, more emotionally intelligent people.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of emotional intelligence. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.